أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our daily iTVusa show, Balancing Deen and Dunya. As we head towards the end of this blessed month, we are honored to have with us an incredible guest today, a community leader, a speaker, someone who has been involved in the work of da'wah and sharing information and knowledge with the Muslim American community for many, many years now. So I'm thrilled to have with us today Shaykh Saad Tasleem. Shaykh Saad holds a bachelor's degree in design as his major and a minor in psychology from the University of Maryland. He has studied at the Islamic University of Medina in Saudi Arabia, earning a bachelor's degree from there as well, focused on the study of Islamic sciences with a diploma in Arabic language and a bachelor's in Islamic law. He graduated from the University of Medina and has since then been traveling extensively around the world as an instructor for AlMaghrib Institute, as a public speaker and as a lecturer. He has, mashallah, an amazing following among the youth. He's able to connect well with them and, mashallah, has an incredible presence on social media as well. I know that there's a lot more to Shaykh Saad and a lot more to what it is that he does. So I'm happy to invite him onto our show so we could learn more about him. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much again, Shaykh Saad, for joining us. I know in these last nights of Ramadan, every moment is precious, and we appreciate you taking a few moments to share with us a little bit more about you and the work that you do.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So a lot of individuals know you probably, throughout the US for the work that you do for AlMaghrib Institute, the classes that you teach. And some of the classes are incredibly relevant to the youth, of course, whether it's the fiqh of clothing or I know some of them have some pretty cool titles too. But a lot of people don't know your journey. What brought you to this place in your life? Teaching Islam, working, to really solidify Muslim American identity, particularly among the youth?
Yeah, so I always say my journey is quite different than a lot of young Muslims or, Muslims born in America. A lot of times you have Muslims whose parents immigrated to America and then, they were born and raised here and they kind of had like that Sunday school experience. They grew up with Muslim friends and all of that. And I really didn't have that experience. My parents are Muslim, alhamdulillah. They were Muslim before as well, but I didn't really grow up close to Islam. I usually say like, what's indicative of that is like the lack of Sunday school, the lack of Muslim friends. Went to public schools and, didn't have Muslim friends growing up. And Islam in my household, my parents' household for a long time was just, I usually say it was almost like a cultural identity. There wasn't much more to it than that. And it was actually in college when I actually accepted Islam. And I know it's weird for people to hear that with someone who has Muslim parents, but I felt like I was making such a drastic change in my life that I actually literally took my shahada and entered into Islam. And it was in college that I went through some stuff, went on a journey to search for the purpose of life, the meaning of life. And I usually say it's when I started to ask myself like the big questions, some of the existential questions. Why are we here? What's the purpose of life? And really it was about, I reached a point in my life where I started to think about what the rest of my life is going to look like. And there's one question that I still have this today, like I try to play things out in my head. in terms of like, okay, if I'm planning to do this, what does this look like in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? And the trajectory that I was headed down, I had certain goals and aspirations. Um, College was part of it. You know, my parents wanted me to get educated, and I was like, fine. My parents actually had these rules for me growing up. They were like, listen, do whatever you want to do. Just make sure you get good grades. Make sure you respect us and don't get arrested. And that's kind of like, you know, do whatever you want to do. And so music was a big part of my life. I was in a band. I kind of like, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to for my band to get a record deal and to get, you know, just make it big. But it was in college where, you know, I started to think about if I actually get that, you know, if I were able to attain that, which by the way, most bands don't get records deal. They don't get rich and famous. You know, it's a very, very small percentage. So even that, I was like, well, let's just say, you know, my band gets a record deal and, you know, we get signed and we can tour and all this kind of stuff. So what does my life look like in 10 years? And then 20 years and 30 years? And I'm like, you know, am I going to be old? Am I going to be like, you know, 60 years old and in a band? And then is that fulfilling? And then I really started to think about people who had already gone um, down that path. And I thought about some of the musicians that I looked up to, and I'm kind of going to show my age here. But Kurt Cobain from Nirvana was someone who I looked up to. You know, Nirvana is one of my favorite bands. For those of you who don't know, he committed suicide, as many other musicians that I looked up to did. And that it always bothered me because I thought to myself, this is a person who had, at least from my perspective, everything in life. He had his creative freedom and, you know, creativity and being able to express oneself creatively has always been a need and desire of mine, even till today. You know, I have other avenues of kind of fulfilling those creative needs, but he was able to do that. And even like, I didn't feel like Nirvana had a compromise on their music. It wasn't like they sold out, you know, like just to get a record deal or just get famous, they changed their music or made it into more pop music, whatever. They were making the music that they want to make. And obviously fame and fortune and all of that. And then why would somebody come to that point in their life? And this is kind of like the peak of his career. What would drive a person to commit suicide? And then countless other musicians and celebrities and so on and so forth. And I thought to myself, there's got to be something that's missing there, where, you know, even with all that, like, how do you still do that? And that really bothered me and worried me, because that's literally the path that I was headed down. And that, like I said, if even that, because most people don't get to attain that. And so I started to think about, you know, what is going to make me truly fulfilled in life. And I went through like a spiritual journey. I actually looked into many faiths. I always tell people Islam was like the last faith that I came to, because part of me was like, Islam can't be the truth, because like I knew Muslims growing up. My parents are Muslim. If it was the truth, then, you know, it would have spoke to me, and I'm like, it didn't. And so I was like, Islam's not the truth. And I looked at other faiths, went down this journey, and I truly didn't find something that truly satisfied and sat well with my nafs, my soul. And then eventually I looked into Islam. And I came to Islam, like I approached Islam in like the harshest way. I was like, all the problems that I hear about, problems about Islam, all the stereotypes, all the issues, like I want answers to them. And it was like head on. And I found that I had good people around me, people who were knowledgeable, people who had wisdom, and they were able to answer my questions. And I remember specifically one person I was speaking to in particular, you know, I brought an issue to them and I said, you know, what's the deal with this? And he said to me, he said, I don't know. He said, let me find the answer for you. Let me talk to somebody who's more knowledgeable, and I'll get an answer for you. And that really like sat with me, because I was like, you know, he's not just trying to convince me that this is the truth. Like, he really wants to be like a messenger for the truth, right? He wants what's best. He wants the truth to be known. And so he's not going to just say something just to like convince me for his own ego. And that to me that resonated with me until today. I think that's a very important part of my message, where like being authentic and the importance of knowledge. And that's what, so when I did, you know, finally accept Islam, I told myself, like, I'm not gonna just be another, I hate to say this, but like another ignorant Muslim. You know, it's kind of like just going with the flow. You know, like people tell you should do this and you do it, and people tell you shouldn't do this and you don't do that, and you just hear things. And that's kind of like someone's Muslim experience. And I was like, no, I need to really know my faith, and I need to study my faith. And I was like, I have to learn Islam. and go down like the academic route, and that's what led me to go study Islam. And I'm grateful for that. Alhamdulillah, I still consider myself someone who is continually learning and getting close to Allah through knowledge. So that's it, kind of in a nutshell.
No, mashallah, I really
Journey.
appreciate you sharing that journey. And, you know, so many times I think we do take it for granted. Like if we're born in a Muslim family, then the assumption is that, you know, we're Muslim. But recognizing that in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions so frequently in the ayat, ilm and aql and fiqh, right? Using our rationale, our knowledge, our thinking. It's really being able to challenge maybe even that which we grew up with, which can sometimes be more rooted in culture than in the deen, and seeking it out for ourselves. So one of the questions that I'll often get in any youth talk, it can be on any topic. I could be talking about identity, I could be talking about marriage, mental health, and invariably in the little, you know, note cards or in the texting questions, there will always come up a question: is music haram? And I am sure that you have experiences. And you just mentioned to our viewers like the impact that music had on you growing up. And we know that we're surrounded by it. Not to put you on the spot, you definitely don't have to give a yes or no answer, but tell me your experience with youth kind of trying to answer those, I guess, those hard questions maybe.
Yeah. Look, so one of the things I've done in my with my learning and then also my teaching as well is kind of not separating, but making a distinction between like I use like cold hard facts or like the nuts and bolts of Islamic law, and then like living the Sharia, right? Because we have the ideal that is given to us in the Quran and the Sunnah, and oftentimes, you know, imams and scholars will talk about that ideal, but sometimes there's a disconnect between that and then like real life, because real life is messy. Real life, we all have problems, we have challenges, we have different struggles that we're going through. It's not as easy as this is haram and that's it, and this is halal, and or this is required, this is wajib fard, so you do it and that's where life stops. That's not how life works. Even going all the way back to the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they were real human beings with real challenges and real issues, and there are matters that they struggled with as well. And I usually give the example of alcohol. When alcohol was prohibited, you know, completely, when it was prohibited completely, yes, we have those narrations of the Sahaba pouring the alcohol in the streets, and some of the companions, they had like had a sip of alcohol and they had, you know, made themselves vomit, even though it wasn't required for them to do that. But there was that the idea of, you know, if Allah has made it haram, then I don't have anything to do with it, right? I want to get rid of it, even though this was a society that was like knee deep in alcohol. Like alcohol is a big part of that society. And I don't think people realize how much alcohol was prevalent and how much it was part of the culture back then. And then for that to happen, for the companions to reach that point, you know, like what spiritual transformation had to have taken place for them to get to that point. But even with that, we cannot, you know, gloss over or like ignore the fact that there were Sahaba who struggled with leaving alcohol. They were companions, at least two that we know of, authentically narrated to us, who seems very likely from the narration that they had an alcohol addiction, and they hated it and they wanted to leave it, but they would keep coming back to alcohol. And the Prophet counseled them and he spoke to them. And so, you know, once again, these are real human beings who struggled with the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were the best of us, of course, and they were an example for us. But that, so, you know, that idea of, you know, we have the ideal in Islam. Now let's talk about how to apply it in our real messy lives. And so, you know, you were mentioning some of the seminars I taught. There's a seminar that I taught called the Fiqh of Chillin', and you said interesting names. But I didn't come up with that name, but it was like kind of like the marketing department was like Fiqh of Chillin'. You know, that class really was just about entertainment and recreation in Islam. So fiqh issues related to entertainment and recreation. And so one of the big topics that we spoke about was music. And initially, you know, I noticed that the only conversation that people wanted to have was, is music halal or haram, right? And like specific like musical instruments, are they halal or they're haram? And yeah, we can talk about the nuts and bolts of it. We can say like, these are the evidences for, these are the evidences against, and this is the scholars who said this, and so on and so forth. But we reached a point in that seminar where I said, look, we really have to talk about like the real life implications of music and the music industry on society. And so going beyond just, you know, is this haram or not? Now, first of all, if you look at the general attitude of the Sharia towards music, what the Sharia recognized, and I don't think there's a difference of opinion regarding this issue, that there are many harms and ills that can come upon society through music. Okay. Regardless of whether we're saying, music altogether is haram or not, or musical instruments or not, to recognize that there are many harms, and whether it's societal harms and then also personal and spiritual harms that can come upon a person, that's a reality that's recognized by all scholars. And one of the famous scholars who considered musical instruments to be permissible, even though if you look at our history, the vast majority of scholars did consider musical instruments to be impermissible. But there were some very well-known figures who considered musical instruments to be permissible. Amongst them was Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala. And I think it's very important to study his view on musical instruments, because his statement regarding musical instruments wasn't, hey, it's halal, go have fun, go party, go to concerts. He was like, yeah, musical instruments are permissible, but here's what you need to watch out for. Yes. So one of the statements he made is, he said, if a person doesn't hold the love of Allah above everything else, then it is not permissible for this person to listen to music. And who can really say, I truly, in my heart, I love Allah above everything else, and nothing, music will not affect me, it will not take me over in that way. And so for that, I would say that's caution for us, and our scholars, even those who talk about the permissibility of music, talk about caution, and how if we're not careful, we can be distracted and taken over. And so I often say, I think every Muslim, regardless of their opinion on musical instruments, should have the goal to minimize the amount of music that they're exposed to in their lives, and also to purify what they're exposing themselves to, and make sure that what they're exposing themselves to is pure. And kind of have an idea of look, I want to cut down on this, the negative part of not just music, but entertainment as a whole. You talk about, we're talking about music, but we can easily have this discussion about movies and TV shows, right? And there's a spectrum of how bad something is for us. And Dr. Suzy, I'm sure you've noticed this as well, but even now compared to just 10 years ago, the type of TV shows and movies that are out there, and what is just normalized for society, there's such a big difference. And I often say, and I don't know how old your audience is, and I'll just try to say this in a PG way, but even nudity and what is just accepted now to be just mainstream entertainment, that wasn't there even 10 years ago. So just being careful about the effect that entertainment is having upon us, and that's really my message, right? Beyond just, because we can get caught up in, and people want to talk about this. They want to talk about the ruling, right? They want to debate whether music is halal or not. But let's just have a real discussion about how music and how the music industry is impacting our lives. The messages that we as a society are willing to listen to and accept through music. And I often say, take any, and this is just as true now as it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago, but you look at the messages that are put across through music and through melody and through beats, and people don't often think about what they're listening to. And because it sounds good, it makes them feel good, they just listen to it. But you can take even I often give this challenge of take the top 10 list right now, of top 10. I don't know what's on the top 10 list right now, but take the lyrics and read them to your parents, or read. Do you think you'd be comfortable reading them at a masjid? Just the lyrics. And that's kind of there you go. You don't need an answer from me. Istafti qalbak, as the Prophet said, ask your heart. I think deep down inside, we do, we have the ability to recognize good from evil and things that really have a bad impact on us.
Absolutely. And I think you are absolutely right in the trajectory that we're seeing. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even certain things that would never be accessible on the television screen are now accessible, not just on the screen, but online through social media. So the normalization of that which can poison our hearts actually has increased, and it puts us in a place where I think we need to be more cautious in terms of what we allow ourselves access to. So along with your Islamic studies and the deep dive that you did into kind of understanding Islam and recognizing how we as everyday, Muslim Americans can apply it in our lives, you also studied as an undergrad design and psychology. why did you take that path, and what are you doing in those fields currently?
Yeah, so psychology, honestly, has always been a big part of my life. My mom's a psychologist. She's retired now. May Allah bless her and bless all of our moms and our parents. But I happen to like psychology is always part of the culture in my house. And I remember like in college when I, was studying psychology, like a lot of this stuff, I was like, oh, like I remember my mom talking about this and these concepts that I kind of just took for granted because we grew up with that, it was being taught now in a classroom. And so, you know, when it came to design, like that was something like creativity. And that's why I think music and that was a big part of like I wanted to have the ability to express myself creatively. And I went through this journey initially. My dad was like, "You're going to college. You should study something that has like a future in it." And back then, like comp sci,
Yes.
computer engineering was a big thing. I was like, "All right, fine, I'll do that." I took one programming class, and I was like, "This is not for me. Like, I can't sit here and just sit in front of a computer and like write code. Like, I just can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life." I switched to architecture. I went to architecture school for a little bit. And I was like, okay, this kind of has a balance of like, creativity and, a little bit more technical stuff. And still I was like, it's not quite doing it for me. Like I still have creative need. Like this is not quite creative enough for me. And then I was like, you know what, I'm just going to study, design and graphic design. And that was kind of like, and for me, that was like, okay, that gives me like a creative outlet. And then, and I was like, I cannot like leave college and not study psychology. And honestly, if I had time to, I would have done a second major in psychology. It's just that by the end, my senior year, I got accepted to the University of Medina. And I think I didn't even need to take that many more classes to get a second major in psychology. But I was like, I'm out. Like I got accepted to Medina. I'll take my bachelor's in design and my minor in psychology, and I'm gonna go. But yeah, so that's why. And so. Creativity, it's still a part of my life today. A lot of people don't know this. I don't really talk about it publicly because I don't really want to get it kind of, mixed in with my da'wah and my teaching. But I have a clothing line. And the main reason for that is actually two reasons why I have a clothing line. Number one, I just want to make clothes for myself. I don't like wearing things that are off the shelf. I don't know. I like to design clothes for myself and wear something that is special, that's made for me, by me. And it's a way for me to express myself creatively and, an outlet for my creativity. And then, I was like, oh, maybe one day this will flourish into a business. I'm not there yet, but one day where I won't have to be kind of reliant on like da'wah and teaching. The whole financial aspect of it, I'm still not comfortable with it. In an ideal world, da'wah and teaching would have nothing to do with finances. Many of our scholars of the past, they were businessmen and they were merchants, and they had they were very secure in their income, and then they were able to teach and kind of have them be unrelated. So that's kind of was one of my long-term goals was if I could have a clothing line, people are interested in like my designs, and I could kind of support myself in that way. We're not there yet, but I hope one day, inshallah. So that's kind of that's where all that came from.
MashaAllah, may Allah grant you tawfiq, inshallah. And I think it's a wonderful endeavor to have a creative outlet as well. That bi'ithnillah hopefully will be a means of rizq, inshallah, down the road as it continues to grow. So one of the questions that we've asked all of our guests on the show so far is, how do you find balance, particularly between deen and dunya? You're doing a lot of things. You have a family, you travel extensively. How do you find that balance?
So I get this question a lot, and I'm just going to be straight up, just keep it honest with you. #real talk. I'm going to keep it real. I don't think I'm completely balanced on a personal level. To me, finding balance is a constant struggle. It's something that we are continually struggling with, to find that balance. I don't think there's just like this it's like an on-off switch, like click, now I'm balanced, my life is perfect and everyone's happy and my parents are happy and my spouse is happy and my kids are happy and my career is going great, and like my creative side and socially and spiritually and everything is perfectly balanced. I don't think that's reality. Even if someone may tell you that, they might be doing quite well in it, but I don't think I don't think that there's perfection in it. And I think as life changes, and life is constantly changing, as we are tested by Allah and we're continually facing new challenges, we constantly have to readjust. We have to reevaluate our lives and readjust. And so for me, it's important that we are continually, consciously, evaluating our lives and saying, look, how am I doing right now? To take a time to reflect upon, and Dr. Suzy, I'm sure you've heard like kind of like the life wheel, different, different slices of our life, our social life and our spiritual life, our family life and our career and all of that. But to really take a look at that and say, how am I doing? Do I find a balance there? And if not, what are some practical things that I can do to, if I'm lacking in one area, to focus on that more? And I know Ramadan is a time where we try to make up for some of our spiritual shortcomings. Speaking of the month of Ramadan, I don't think the month of Ramadan is supposed to be balanced when it comes to Deen and Dunya. I think there's supposed to be an overabundance of Deen. And I think we're supposed to be imbalanced in the favor of Deen in the month of Ramadan, almost as a recharge. We hear this all the time, recharging. But yeah, that's true. And we go hard in the month of Ramadan, and that is by design. We find that, as the Prophet ﷺ said, this is the month in which the doors of paradise are open, the doors of hellfire are closed. We know in the last 10 days, as Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, the Prophet would shadda mi'zara, he would tighten his waist belt. Like he would work hard in these last 10 days, unlike, forget the rest of the year, even the rest of the Ramadan. So there are times when we got to go hard, so for me, it's a constant struggle. We're constantly evaluating ourselves and saying, for me, like, okay, how am I doing? Even, you spoke about family. As my kids get older, their needs are different than they were when they were younger. And I have two kids, two boys. My older one is 8, my younger one is 4. And my older one, even like 3, 4, 5 years ago, he didn't even really notice if I was gone. It was cool. Like I'd come home. But now at this age, even at 8 years old, like he notices literally every time I leave, he notices. And it's he comes and he takes, like, he has an exam for me. He's like, so where are you going? How many days? When are you going to be back? How many times are you going to call me? It's I have to take like this. It's like an interrogation. Alhamdulillah. So even like how much I travel now and how long I travel for now is different than 5 years ago, because I recognize now that my family needs not just time, but how that time is spent with them. So I wish I had like a straight up like easy answer. You just do these 5 things and your life will be balanced, but I don't think it works in that way.
SubhanAllah, I feel like this has been the consensus, in the past 28 or so days among our guests, that balance is something that we strive for in different ways at different times. And like you said, if the balance during the month of Ramadan, as it should be, is heavier on the side of focusing on our deen, then it may mean, and I usually tend to see this the week after Eid, we're going to be catching up on a lot of emails, on a lot of responding to things that are maybe part of the dunya. But even as they are part of the dunya, keeping in mind that our intention can allow that which we do in the dunya to be part of our deen as well. So in the last minute or so that we have together, is there any advice or, bits of wisdom or gems that you'd want to leave our audience with, particularly youth who may actually be coming from backgrounds where they have their own questions about the deen or things of that sort?
Yeah, so I can reflect upon my life and what really made a difference for me. And I don't want to I know we only have like a minute or so. I don't want to go on like a rant about social media and just celebrity culture and all of that. But I do feel very strongly about where we're headed and how dangerous it really is. For the longest time, I would speak about, many speakers, we would talk about the importance of knowledge and seeking knowledge and how that's important to connect us to our faith. And give us that balance and give us direction in life. Unfortunately, what's happened now is a lot of our knowledge is just taken from social media, and we sometimes feel that because we're watching YouTube videos or watching TikToks or whatever, I'm learning my deen, and what a lot of that has become is just like another form of entertainment, where like if we really think about how much we're benefiting spiritually, Allahu A'lam, right? So one of the things that I would advise myself and all my brothers and sisters out there is, obviously, once again, knowledge is important. It's important to have a connection, a continual connection with knowledge. It doesn't have to be everything. I'm not saying you have to go out and become a scholar, but even something small but consistent. Beyond just just watching stuff online and engaging in like reaction videos and things like that.
Yeah.
Kind of leave that for the entertainment, but like actually studying something. And it can be online. There are plenty of online programs where you can study hadith and you can study tafsir and you can study the Quran, and there's so much to study there. That's great. But ideally, it should be with a person, with somebody individually. For me, mentorship was a big part of my journey. And alhamdulillah, I had good people in my life that were mentors to me. Until today, I've mentors that I turn back to. Like when I'm dealing with issues in life, that I can call up and I can say, Sheikh so-and-so, whatever, some of my teachers, some of my mentors. And these are some of these people I actually lecture with them. You know, they're considered my colleagues, but to me, like, they're still a mentor of mine. Like, I'll still call them up and say, hey, what is your advice on this matter? So having that real in-person connection with knowledge, I would say, is vital in this day and age.
Yes, no, Jazakallah khair. I think that's incredibly important and something that, you know, all of us should take to heart and act upon. So if our viewers want to follow you, learn more from you, maybe take some AlMaghrib classes with you, the fiqh of chilling, for example, where could they find you?
Yeah, so I'm across social media. You know, it's kind of like the necessity of times. Alhamdulillah. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. If you Google my name, like all my social media will come up. So you can connect with me there, inshallah. And obviously almaghrib.org. I teach seminars with Al-Maghrib where, you know, I was talking about the importance of knowledge and connecting in person. Our on-site seminars are, you know, we have like weekend seminars where you really sit down and take a deep dive in knowledge. To me, that's one of the best parts of teaching. Like the online stuff is whatever. I actually have a social media manager who posts my stuff online for me. But to me, it's that, you know, in-person, you know, learning together with students that I think is amazing. So almaghrib.org, you check out my seminars there. And shameless plug for my clothing line, even though I still feel really weird doing this. But saadtasleem.com, my name will take you to my clothing line. It's not for everyone. It's kind of like my own personal sense of style, but you know, if you like something there.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh Saad. Again, we appreciate you joining us and for sharing your journey with us, you know, your own exploration of the Deen, coming back to the Deen, studying abroad, and for advising us all in terms of, you know, pathways that we may take to hopefully get closer to Allah, to increase our knowledge, and inshallah to utilize that beneficial knowledge in ways that can help others while also helping ourselves. So thank you again for joining us.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been great. Alhamdulillah.
And thank you to all of our viewers for joining us today. Again, you know where to find Shaykh Saad now. Google him. You'll find out all his information and how to connect with him, inshallah. And I hope that you will all join us tomorrow, inshallah, at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the last episode of our iTVusa Ramadan show, Balancing Deen and Dunya. Jazakum Allah khair. Wassalamu alaikum.